you become less willing to compromise who you are just to keep someone as a friend, because if you have to compromise part of who you are, then they're not much of a friend.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then and that actually kind of brings me to my question. One of my best friends, super extremely intelligent, left-handed genius kind of person, but he is incredibly religious. But it's funny though, he's a very open-minded person. So he's what I think you coined this term, a functional atheist, pretty much. He does what he feels is right morally based on his own moral compass, which is informed by like the Judeo-Christian values. But I mean, I've had the conversation with him like, okay, if you were born in China and your everything that you know is informed by that experience, wouldn't you don't you see how those two conflicting paradigms kind of make the whole thing garbage? And he never really has an answer for that, and I feel like I'm not really getting through to him, but he does see my point. It's it's really tough. I feel like I could kind of get him to like let go of the religious thing altogether, but it's really tough to just get through to somebody who's so close to being, he's, like you say, he's a functional atheist, but he still holds on to some things that are kind of ridiculous. Like, he'll go against some things in the Bible, but if I take the Lord's name in vain, that still bothers him. I'm like, you sin in your own way, but, it's frustrating, I guess.
Yeah, and it kind of just goes to show how indoctrination works. I mean, this idea that taking the Lord's name in vain, words have some kind of magical meaning, that they can cause harm. And I mean, that's really where this whole blasphemy concept comes from, is this idea that, if you use someone's name in a bad way, you would call evil spirits down on them. It's really magical thinking. But it's very interesting how he was probably thoroughly indoctrinated as a child, and it's very difficult to let go of that.
And that's odd because we both were very traditional conservative church background, and we both kind of evolved in our thinking to at least see other perspectives, but he's not so much acting on it as much as I am. It's really frustrating. Yeah. But I don't want to take too much more time. I know you got a lot of callers, but no, I'm glad you guys are doing your show, and it's good to get this off my chest and kind of talk to somebody about it.
Well, and I'm glad you called, because we actually got an email this week from an atheist, a black atheist, who was a little offended by one of our video clips, because I guess since we had someone call the show probably a year and a half ago asking about black atheists, and this periodically comes up. We've had a lot of people contact us and say, hey, I'm African American and I'm an atheist and we do exist and stuff like that. But this guy was kind of offended, and he was saying, why did you ask the question, why are black people so religious? And I don't actually think we've ever asked that question on the show.
Well,
I think other people have.
Yeah, there was an accusation that we had gone under the assumption that the African American community tends to be more religious than other.
Nobody's sitting with the data in front of them, but as an African American, I would kind of agree with that statement. Not that necessarily validates it, but from my experience, being an African American, yes, we are more religious as a population than most. So
yeah, and my big kind of quandary about the whole issue is that I can't possibly put myself in their shoes and in their mind to the extent that would really be necessary. But it seems to me that if you compared the average white male with the average African American male, one of them clearly has less reason to have any interest at all in Christianity.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a bit of a puzzle.
But from your perspective, you have a more broader view.
Sure.
From someone who's African American. They're like, well, yes, they see the same history, but it's through a much different context. They see it as a delivery from slavery. They don't look further back at, well, you were kind of brought into this mess and then delivered from it.
Yeah.
Well, and some people can say, oh, it's a blessing. You can almost feel privileged that, well, look in West Africa now. It's not as good as being in America now. So there's a couple generations of just people's entire lives being just horrible.
Yeah, there's some kind of tap dancing going on.
Short-sighted.
Yeah, because a lot of things that really suck about West Africa are directly related to the number of missionaries that have gone there and dabbled in people's culture and promoted superstition over reason. And that's not to discount the good things that people have done with providing medical care and feeding people and stuff like that. But that comes at a cost.
So there's one other thing I wanted to get to before we let you go, and that was there was a note on here that you were asking about. You're in Dallas, and you were asking for suggestions on finding other atheists to socialize with.
Yeah, and I was kind of wondering, when you guys do get together, what's the... I just don't know. Like, I don't want to just sit around and just kind of talk about, I feel this, I feel like that. It's kind of like, I don't want to go to like a church type thing. I don't know. I'm just kind of wondering what that...
Then there are a couple of atheist groups in the Dallas area, including the North Texas Church of Free Thought, which is more of a church-type environment. It's kind of like a free thinkers, Unitarian Universalist church, where they're building a community, focusing on families in a real way, rather than what Focus on the Family does. But there's a number of groups up in the Dallas area, and I'm sure that any number of them would love to have you contact them. The thing is, what goes on at these atheist meetings? Well, for example, we have happy hours on Thursday, and what gets talked about on any given Thursday is entirely dependent on who shows up. There may be quite a few people sitting around bashing religions. There may be some people discussing a religion or atheism or skepticism at a sort of higher level of discussion. And the subjects may never come up. We've had discussions and debates about free will, identity, and sometimes it's just you're sitting around drinking and talking about movies and things that you enjoy doing. It's just a way to hang out with other people. And so I would suggest that anybody who is looking for an atheist group, who goes to a meeting and doesn't necessarily find it to their liking, go to a couple, because most of the groups that I've dealt with, you're going to get a different turnout at different events, and what goes on is going to vary depending on who's there and what kind of mood everybody's in. So. Okay, and you said, what was it, North Texas? North Texas Church of Free Thought is one of them, and then there's also the Dallas area atheists, and there's one other group up there, but I'm forgetting the name, and now they're going to kill me because, what site is it? Metroplex Atheists. There we go. Thank you. And
you should probably check Meetup also, because a lot of these groups, smaller groups, will post on on Meetup, and that's the only place you'll find them. But yeah, and like Matt said, kind of shop around, go to several meetings before you make up your mind about a group, because one of the things about the ACA is that we have a broad range of activities that we offer to people, and we're not trying to be all things to all people. So if you come to some ACA meetings and it's not for you, and you prefer one of the other atheist or secular groups in the Austin area, we're very happy that we have those available, because we understand that not everyone's going to like the same thing.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them, including the UU Church, the Ethical Society of Austin. But even within the ACA, there are different people and different activities, for example, at the lecture than there are at the happy hour, which is different from the dinner after the show, which is different from Godless Gamers, which is taking place tomorrow night at my place, where basically we sit around and play board games and stuff. And
I might have to come check you guys out. My brother's actually a student at UT, so I might come down there and stay with him for a weekend and maybe come meet up with you guys.
Come on down.
Sounds like a plan. And on that note, Brandon, I got to let you go because we got a shorter show and the lines are all full, but I appreciate the call.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Right, thanks.
Bye.
We've got, is it Clayton in Sicily?
Yeah, that's me.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Pretty well.
Yeah. I'm calling in because I have a theory on the existence of our universe and the existence of God.
Okay.
And I wrote a one-page summary about it, and I'd like to read it to you.
How long of a page is it?
It's a very short page.
Go for it.
Okay.
Before there was anything in our universe, there was nothing. But how could something come to exist from nothing? Nothing must be something, right? Not in my theory. My theory is that there is always an infinite amount of nothing outside of something, and that something is continually produced wherever there is nothing. What that something is the conscience of an unborn universe, and these consciences are also continually being produced. Our universe was at one time one of those unborn universes. But something happened. Just as it does for all unborn universes, its conscience began to think. But what would the conscience of nothing think about? It would think about what it is, because it wouldn't know, and this thought would continually build up in the conscience until it was so compressed that the pressure would cause the conscience to explode into a big bang. What I am saying is that thought is the first form of energy that has ever existed, and that everything in our universe is just another form of this energy. I believe that the energy, that is everything in our universe, is the God of our universe, and that God has always known everything there is to know about the universe. In the beginning, God's knowledge was very limited, but now it is very complex because everything that has been created from that original thought energy is an extension of God's consciousness, even ourselves. However, I believe that all things that exist also have their own conscience, everything from the smallest particle on up to the entire universe. It's just a matter of how closely you look. I'll use a rock as an example, because I came up with my theory while I was in the woods on my land enjoying nature, and there was this huge, beautiful rock, and it was almost as if I could see into it and see its conscience. It was like me and the rock were interacting. Now, when I stepped away from the rock and went up to my car that was parked at the top of my land, I could see my entire piece of land, and I could see that it was all working together as one conscience. I see it on an even larger scale when I look at the night sky. After this experience, I came to the conclusion that everything is very much alive. I also came to the conclusion that man, though he, like all other things, are an extension of God, has the ability to know as much as God. I feel that man is very close to beginning exploration outside of his own universe, and that once we get outside of our universe, our task will then be to track down the beginning of nothing, and we will become an extension of God that allows him to see outside his own universe, something that I think will keep us occupied for quite some time. And perhaps this is what Christians are saying when they say that God made us in his image.
Sure. So my first question is, how do you prove that you're right?
That's going to take some time.
Yeah, and here
I came up with this theory through a personal experience.
Sure.
And now, one of the common things that's accepted by modern physicists is that nothing must be something. That's something I've learned since I had the experience.
Sure.
And,
so
go ahead.
Yeah. So the biggest problems I have are that essentially you had some experience and you reached a conclusion based on this. That to me is utterly irrational, because you admit that you are going to have a lot of work to do to prove that you're right, yet you've reached this conclusion. And I prefer to reach conclusions after there's sufficient evidence to actually support them. So the fact that something seems right or seems interesting or maybe a neat idea or a neat way of looking at something has absolutely no impact on whether or not I'm going to accept it. It's the evidence that determines whether or not I should believe that. So this idea that rocks are conscious, first of all, not only do we not have any evidence that I'm aware of that this is true, but we have considerable evidence that it isn't. You seem to be redefining consciousness as well as a number of different things.
And I have a question here, because you kept saying conscience. So did you mean to say conscience or consciousness? Because those are they have two different meanings. So which one are you?
The conscience of an unborn universe.
Conscience. What does that mean to you?
You can simply replace that with a point of nothingness.
No. What does the word conscience mean to you? How are you using it?
Conscience is the thing that allows things to exist. It's whatever it was that produced the energy that causes all matter to exist.
Sure.
Okay, that's a novel definition.
Yeah, you're just kind of misusing